Tim Watts from Bama Online. He says I only bring him on after they lose or after they struggle. Well, we're breaking tendencies today because Alabama looked very good against LSU. Nick Saban called it the best team win of the year so far. Tim, I'm curious. This feels different than most Alabama teams where we know what they are most of the season. I don't remember seeing an Alabama team evolve like this. 2015, maybe. But this still feels like a less perfect version of that.
Yeah, it does. I mean, one of the things I was looking forward to this season, we almost always know what Alabama is when they walk into a season. This team, there was a lot of uncertainty. You had a new offensive coordinator, a new defensive coordinator. You had a new quarterback, after, quite the discussion of that position. So didn't really know what to expect. Has had its bumps along the way, but you kind of feel like they're figuring things out. You see the offensive line's a little bit better from week to week, it seems. And, obviously LSU is a super talented team, and they came in with a lot of confidence. I mean, they had choreographed all their touchdown dances. They were in the end zone, and there was 11 of them involved. But, and they should be. It's one of the most prolific offenses in the country. So, yeah, I mean, it's not just one side of the ball or one position. There's just a lot of improvement.
Well, and I've talked about this multiple times over the last few weeks, that if you were not an Alabama fan, this feels like the most likable Alabama team. And I was trying to imagine, like, for Alabama fans, because they've had so much success, like, would they embrace this team the way they have other teams? Because, like, how can you not love Terrion Arnold and Malachi Moore and those guys? But it didn't seem like they were going to ultimately be as successful as most Alabama teams. But now the window feels open for, wait, maybe these guys could beat Georgia. Maybe they could make a playoff.
To me, I still think I said this early on, it was a team that was a work in progress. We'll know what they are completely at the end of the season, but I do think it's a game by game team. You know what I mean? You head to Kentucky, you head to Auburn. There's still a lot of stuff they've got to deal with. They've had a really good run at home. They played some good teams. I mean, Texas is a top 10 team. LSU might be the best offense in the country. They're right up there with Washington. Ole Miss, how good does that win look now? And you look at the adjustments. How many times did you see an Alabama team successful in the first half and struggle in the second half? I feel like we saw that a lot last year, but Kevin Steele, that he's given up 10 points. His defense has given up 10 points in the second half to LSU, Tennessee, and Ole Miss combined. 10
That's
points.
crazy. That's crazy.
That's amazing. And that's a team that had success in the first half. Adjustments, and kudos to the players. They always seem to make a play, like the Dallas Turner tip and the Arnold pick. They always seem to have that one play they've got to have in these games.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned the Ole Miss win, because I think about the circumstances of that. So that's the first game after USF, which I still believe was let's just show everybody what we're dealing with here with the quarterbacks. And so Milroe gets, back in the starting role, but they still hadn't quite adjusted. Like, Milroe and Reese hadn't quite adjusted to each other yet. It feels like they're much more comfortable together. Like, last night felt like the first time they were really calling stuff that really suits what Jalen does well.
Yeah, and I think there was that period of getting to know each other. And, I've made jokes about it, but you don't get many chances to coach an athlete like Jalen Milroe. He's got a big arm. He's an athlete. He does it all. Didn't see a lot of that at Notre Dame. So Tommy Rees kind of had to learn how to call plays for him. And then Milroe had to learn to adjust what Tommy Rees wanted to call. And I think you saw that yesterday. You saw a lot of motions. If you watch that play on the first power run to go on their first touchdown, if you watch Amari Niblack comes in motion, seals that edge, he walks into the end zone. I mean, there's just a lot of little things. These running backs out of the backfield, you know what I mean? That helps Jalen Milroe when he's under pressure, and he did a terrific job of finding those guys.
I also think Milroe has learned that people do fear his arm, and he can take advantage of that. There's one of the touchdowns last night where he had the ball cocked and ready to throw until he got to the line of scrimmage, and then he tucks and just takes off like there's a rocket strapped to his butt. Like, that was more nuance than you'd seen from him the whole year. Like, he kept that defense at bay with the threat that he was going to throw, and then all of a sudden, kaboom! And they couldn't.
Yeah.
Like the angles were terrible.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like you saw him. I know you're talking about the touchdown where he ran to the left. That's another thing the offense does. It gives them that option. If that linebacker, he has to commit, that defender has to commit. Do I take the running back, wide receiver in the flat, or do I take Milroe? And look, I've said this all along. He looks like Adrian Peterson running to me. And when he ran, it's power. It's power. Ask Harold Perkins, who met him at the goal line on one of his touchdowns. They had to help Harold up, and Milroe was just standing there. And Harold's a physical, strong tackler and just basically bounced off Jalen Milroe. That's how big and that's how strong he is. But I agree with you. If you go back and look at that play, I tell you one of the plays that shows kind of his progression to me is the short pass to Jace when he was under pressure for the long run up the left sideline. Go back and watch that play. There's 5 defenders surrounding him. He is pinned in on the corner. Now, Jace had the great football IQ of leaking out, holding up his hand like a guy wide open, and he found him. But I mean, that was a great, and he didn't panic. He did a good job. But you go back to that likability of this team. I think when you look at Alabama's team last year, what did you think of Bryce? You thought of Will. You know what I mean? 2 superstars, top 5 guys, great human beings, great prospects, and great players. This year, you kind of just got like an even kill. Whoever your favorite player is on that team. I mean, look at Proctor. Proctor has been thrown in the fire and has steadily improved this entire season. So there's so many like little mini stories going on with this team that you've got to love.
Well, okay, let's talk about the offensive line too, because I also think the improvement of Milroe has making those guys look better. Because we tend to blame the offensive line for any sack.
Yeah,
it's not always the case, and I felt like early in the season there were times when Milroe was kind of walking himself into sacks.
Sure.
It does not feel like he's doing that nearly as often anymore.
No, you know what he's doing? He's stepping into that pocket. The offensive line is often creating that pocket. So in that pressure, they're pushing pressure to the edge. So if you drop back out, you're no longer in a safe space, right? You step into that pocket. And it's not natural if you think about it to step in between 5 defenders. It is natural to step out against that. So again, that's showing his progression, being more comfortable. And you saw him do that several times last night. But I agree. Offensive line, it was a lot of guys. I mean, they were dominating the front. You saw, I mentioned Amari Niblack's block. Robbie Oots had some great blocks, especially clearing up that middle. But, I mean, Jaden Roberts, Tyler, Seth, Latham and Proctor, I thought they did a fantastic job.
Yeah, and they're going to get tested by Kentucky. Like, Deion Walker's one of the best D linemen in the country.
Sure.
J.J. Weaver's tough to deal with on the edge. They will probably get a much better test from Kentucky than they got from LSU at that spot. But I also feel like Kentucky is a good warm-up for Georgia because they're kind of a Georgia light.
Yeah, they don't have the same talent as Georgia, obviously. Hey, Georgia was in a good day. Missouri, I tell you what, I mean, I don't want to get on a tangent. Missouri's a good football team. Missouri's a good football team, and that was a good test for Georgia yesterday. But, yeah, I agree. I mean, you going against that defense, you're kind of getting a taste of what Georgia's going to bring down the road. I think it's going to be similar to what Auburn tries to do as well. I mean, LSU made this simple. We're not letting him beat us deep. And any deep ball he threw was double coverage. Okay, so it was, hey, we're going to see if he can beat us in the middle of the field or with his legs, and he can. And Jalen Milroe might not want to be labeled as a running quarterback, but I'm definitely calling him a quarterback who can run. There's no doubt. Like, I'm not saying he's just he's not Tommy Frazier running the option because he can throw the ball too. But, man, when he runs, when he tucks, and a lot of that was just improvised scrambles. I mean, I would not have wanted to have been a defensive coordinator against either of those quarterbacks yesterday. It was just you couldn't really win. If you brought pressure, you're one-on-one with some great receivers. You're short on the back end. If you didn't, and I know I saw the reaction and got the text going, Spy Daniels. I'm like, dude, it's not that easy. I mean,
they were trying to spy him. It really depends on whether you get caught inside the tackle box or outside the tackle box, and Daniels just kills you by going the other direction.
LSU was trying to do the same thing with Milroe. It's hard. Those are not normal. Those are not normal athletes. They're both hard to tackle. They're both creative with the way they run. So I did get a lot of spy him. I'm like,
They
They're,
were.
they're,
It's not,
they're
it's not
trying.
easy.
Yeah, the spot's just not as good as this.
So, Sam, I'm curious. You cover recruiting all through the Southeast and deal with basically national recruiting, and so you see the politics of all this. I do want to ask you about another team. A&M loses to Ole Miss yesterday. It was not a terrible loss. Like, they missed a field goal at the end. Like, they fought. They didn't get dominated. But as someone who has covered the building of a dynasty, and that's what A&M wanted. They wanted to be competitive in the SEC and for the national title. What do you do with Jimbo? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to simply, I don't think that's working. I don't think that's a fit. I mean, Jimbo kind of went out FSU, kind of, was kind of, limping to the finish line. He's had a few moments at Texas A&M, but if I'm a Texas A&M booster, they put a lot of money into that program. They put a lot of money into the NIL and the recruiting. I mean, it wasn't just Nick Saban saying they bought a whole class, and they did. They did, it's not illegal. I still hear people saying they dropped the bag. It's a direct deposit. There's no,
right.
There's no chip bag on the.
There's a 1099 involved.
Yeah,
like, there's paperwork.
There's no chip bag on the front porch. Just say blue chips. So.
Yeah.
So I'm not judging them for that, but they went out and they got a ton of kids, best class ever. Most of them left. There's just a lot of problems doing with that. But I will say, I don't think now Texas A&M is not a bad football team to me. Yeah. I think they're a good football team. I think, like you said, they're competitive. They were competitive with Alabama, competitive with Ole Miss, who's a top 10 team. But I just don't think that what they want, their investment, I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze at this point. So I think you follow Mark Davis with the Raiders, right? You pay $85 million to do a coaching change, and you go try to get your guy.
I had an agent in the coaching world, who represents coaches, tell me that this was a few weeks ago. Josh McDaniels won't get fired with the Raiders. They would owe him $51 million. And then when he got fired, my mind immediately shifted to Texas A&M. I was like, oh, well, somebody will do it. So.
Well, I think if you get your coach, I think I don't think Mike Shula was doing a terrible job at Alabama, but when you looked at the fact you thought you could get a Nick Saban, you have to make that upgrade. Texas A&M's, I mean, when you're talking strictly football, and I know the SEC fans aren't used to a lot of the stuff that goes with the program, but when you look at them strictly talking football, they've got everything that Texas has. And you can see Texas.
They got everything that Alabama has and LSU has and Georgia has. Like, they could be that.
They probably got a little bit more when it comes to the NIL. I think they've got some guys that desperately want to win. When you look at Alabama, you look at the SEC, Alabama, Auburn, all these teams have won in the last decade or so. They've all got a national championship. They've all had success. Texas A&M's been a while. So I think they're extremely hungry. I think it's similar to Texas, but there's got to be some frustrations there. You brought in Petrino. You thought he had all the answers, and again, they did lose their starting quarterback, but they just can't get over whatever hump.
Yeah.
They just can't really get over that hump right now.
It's amazing. So, I feel like I got to ask everybody that, because I know it sounds crazy in my mind, the idea of paying $76 million, but it's a lot of money next year, the year after that, the year after that, and the year after that. So it's going to be a lot of money no matter what.
They might feel he's close to flipping this thing around. I mean, it's hard to know what I know that rich, powerful people usually are rich and powerful for a reason, and they're used to getting their way. And again, Texas A&M's not a terrible team. They've had some moments of a couple of flips here and there. They've won a couple of big ball games, but college football is just not for the meek. I'm going to send that. I'm going to say this. Yeah. They can sit here and there's not going to be many easy wins. I looked up yesterday in the early games, there's like 5 game-winning or game-tying field goals going on at once.
Yes.
4 TVs pulled out. I'm like, what the heck is going on? I mean, you had all those games. Texas, we got a coach going for it 4th and 4. We had a bananas game. So enjoy every win your team gets, man. Enjoy them all.
And maybe that's why Nick Saban is enjoying these so much. He may be blowing blood vessels, yelling, but He seems to be smiling and laughing after games a lot more often now. So
I think he likes this team. I think the recruiting's done well for Alabama. I felt that with last year's class. It's always, Nick Saban's career from a media standpoint is when is he leaving? When is he leaving? When is he leaving? When is he retiring? When is he retiring? When is he retiring? That's what we've dealt with. One rumor after another. Judging by his actions, I would say he's enjoying life and having success. I mean, there's a lot of talk with Alabama fans that he was starting Milroe, he had lost the team, and they were doing
right.
what they. I mean, seriously, there was discussions all over.
This is as close, because they all say they're tight knit, but this feels very tight knit.
You see them on the sideline. Yeah. If Milroe makes a mistake, if the defense makes a mistake, you can see them coming off the sideline, and the bench catches them. High five, head up, coaches get them. All that kind of stuff. It is a close-knit group.
And the last Alabama team I remember like that was 2015. Jonathan Allen, Dalvin Tomlinson, Ashawn Robb. They kind of rode herd on everybody else. Yep. But this is one I feel like the DBs kind of set the tone, and Milroe on this one.
We can't leave this show without talking about Caleb Downs. I mean,
oh yeah,
come on, man. We knew how great he was. I mean, there was no doubt. This guy, first of all, was incredible athlete, incredible kid. He had all the tools, but then mentally, he was at a different level. Coaches, I don't know how many times I heard a coach say Caleb was asking about this scheme, or Caleb was asking about this, or Caleb knew the Bama defense as well as the secondary guys probably did last year while he was in high school. I mean, he was drilling like Charles Kelly and those guys. He was drilling the DB coaches, but just unbelievable. I think he should be a consideration for an All-American, first-team All-American myself, not just freshman. He's been phenomenal. One of my board posters just said he's the first freshman in Alabama history to have 10 tackles in 3 games. So,
wow,
that's a mouthful with the defense that's been at Alabama under Saban.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm excited to see what this team can be the rest of the way, because they are evolving before our eyes, and it's been fun to watch. Tim, thank you so much.
Always, man. Appreciate it. Anytime, Andy.
Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.